Good evening. I hope you can hear me okay. My name's Henry Normal, and this is the fourth of my Zooms where I interview fellow Flapjack Press poets, and it's the final one. So I hope you've enjoyed them if you've been watching them, and if you haven't, there are three others that will be up on the YouTube, as we old people call it, very soon. So you can catch up on those. And I've got a brilliant guest tonight. What we're going to do is we're going to read some poems, we're going to have an interview, and then we've got a chat facility. And if you open the chat up, halfway through, I'll ask for questions. And if you've got any questions that you can ask our guest or myself, be very happy to answer those, and we'll answer those as honestly as possible. So without further ado, we're here for an hour. Let me introduce my last guest. I've met Rob, and he's a lovely bloke and a brilliant performer, and a brilliant writer, and he's got a book out called How I Made My Millions. Lives in Manchester, and please welcome Rob Steventon.
Hello.
Steventon.
Steventon, it's a little bit unusual.
Steventon, yeah. Stevenson, I know a lot of, but Steventon, where's that derived from?
Well, I can only assume it was like rebels from the original Stevenson clan.
Yeah. And they didn't want anything to do with that lot.
Yeah, they wanted to break free from them, I think.
Yeah.
So that's as far as I can find where it comes from. The rest of my Steventon side of the family are all in the southeast, close to yourself.
And you're born and bred Manchester?
No, so I moved here to study, and so it'd be nearly. Would it be 14 years ago now? Yeah, 14 years. And I sort of feel like an honorary Mancunian now. I hope hope I'm allowed to give myself that title. I'm from Congleton, and my family are all from Stoke-on-Trent in the middle.
Yeah. It's still north. It's still north. It just qualifies.
Yeah.
It's always quite funny if I go up to Newcastle and I say I'm from the north. They say, "Where are you from?" I say Nottingham. They go, "What?"
Yeah.
They don't even think people are from Durham or from the north.
People wear a court in Nottingham. You can't call that north.
That's very true. That's very true.
Nottingham, don't they, as well?
Sorry?
They call people duck in Nottingham.
They do. Do you know what? I think it's quite a nice term of endearment. I find there's little terms of endearment all around the country. People call you all sorts of things, darling and dear and whatever, especially as you get old. So that's always quite nice. You're not going to be stabbed if somebody's called you duck.
Yeah.
Nice to see you again. And you've got a brilliant book out, which came out last year, I believe. How I Made My Millions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it was an honour to be picked up by Paul at Flapjack. I think particularly so, given that the poets who sort of gave me most inspiration and then came to be very close friends and nurtured me and supported me through it. Most of them are on Flapjack as well.
Name some names. Who's been good to you?
Oh, Thick Richard, Dominic Berry, Dave Viney, Jackie Hagan.
Great. Well, we've had either this year or last year. We've had most of those on the Zoom.
Yeah, Genevieve Walsh as well up in Halifax. But it's a wonderful crew. It's been really lovely as restrictions have eased since the end of the pandemic that we've been able to actually do things in person again and just catch up with them.
So it's an interesting area. This. Do you find that there's a great sense of community and camaraderie amongst poets?
Definitely, and I think part of it's necessitated by the vulnerability of the art form, because it's so, performance poetry is so so broad, like it encompasses such a variety of things, but it can encompass very, 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 very intimate and emotional aspects. And I think going up on stage and performing that, I think it necessitates, more camaraderie and almost like a sort of pastoral, like sense of solidarity and support from.
I think of it as being in the trenches together.
It is.
I remember when I was up in Manchester, and Lem Sisse and I used to go. We'd get to somewhere like Aberdeen, and of course we'd go in a car, and it'd be about 5 hours to get to Aberdeen. And the only person you'd know in Aberdeen would be each other.
Yeah.
And then you'd do a show, and then that would take about an hour, and then you'd come back. So in actual fact, you're spending about 13 hours with each other.
Yeah.
Very, very bonding.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And what's really wonderful about it, and I think I've found putting on a night in Manchester as well, is putting acts on in Manchester and then coming to their town to do a gig. It's this sort of national community. It sort of feels like. I was did a gig with yourself down in Brighton, and then Janine Bood's gig in Lewis, and Janine was so amazingly accommodating and
yes, she was. We'll come on to that in a minute. Now, I'm very conscious that I want some of your poems. So have you got one that you could start us off with?
I certainly have. So I'll do a very specific type of poem to open up. This one uses only one of the 5 vowels all the way through. This one uses the letter A, and it's called Cashback. 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 Pah! Bank wants that back, man. Catch cash, pay back what can. Always lay a savvy plan. Back at drab shanty pad, ants attack man's snack stash bad. Chap snacks at saggy salad. Chap casts once, sways at sad ballad. Chap gawps at hard facts a la bank. Wayward chap lays back blank. Chap asks pals, cash? Pff, thanks. Chap's arm fat as chaps had many cry wanks. Chap's pals chat bland mank drawl. Twats bark black cab cats calls. Chap falls back flat. Drab hallway falls. Can't stand sharp pangs. Clasps achy balls. Chap's fantasy walks past. Sassy lass, Natash. Happy Tash snarls sarcasm at chap. Taps away black fag ash. Chap walks away abash. Catch all cash, chap says. Catch all cash, says chap. Chap's gaffer grants chap a grand, yay. Plays jazzy tracks all day. Bags Havana vacay. Chap swans away, drag garms, sachet away. Chap's jaw clamps, MDMA. Adamantly, chap starts day. Catch all cash, chap says. Catch all cash, says chap. Thank you. I often get pulled up in that for use of the word achy, which I've found is listed in both the Oxford and Collins English dictionaries with both the spellings ACHY and ACHEY.
All right, yeah.
But what I used to qualify it is that if you hark your mind back to 1993, a gentleman named Billy Ray Cyrus released the most song of all time, Achy Breaky Heart, within which he used the spelling ACHY.
Is that an American spelling, is it?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, because they sometimes fool me on Wordle. They'll have an American spelling.
Yes, yeah.
Losing the U, the little knuts. So I'm intrigued. Now I love that, by the way. Very playful, and your book's full of lots of different styles and lots of different sort of inventions. And it's a pleasure to read. And I was intrigued why you'd gone for "How I Make My Millions" as a title.
That's a really good question. So I had a few sort of draft titles, none of which were very serious. And it's the one that, because it's not a very serious title, it's obviously, but it's the one that amongst those draft titles that that I could tie as closely as possible to a theme throughout the book. So there's what it's about really is about the mirage of meritocracy and about the pitfalls of unstable work and the cost of living crisis, which has been going on for a lot longer than the media have been talking about, and about those things really. So it's very tongue in cheek. It's a song by Radiohead as well.
Yes, we'll get on to that, because I know you've got a big interest in music.
Absolutely, yeah. I did my did my degree in music. I was what I moved to Manchester for.
Yes, well, it's a good place to move for music. And how did you first get into poetry?
That's a really good one. So I had only sort of a passing interest in poetry when I was at school, and I didn't have the typical teenage aversion to it, but it certainly wasn't something that I was head over heels in love with. I discovered a few things like Ted Hughes and stuff, but there was one event that sealed it more than anything else, and it was in my first year of uni. I had a job working on the bar at the Thirsty Scholar on Oxford Road, or just off Oxford Road on New Wake in Manchester, and they had this all-day festival there, and I came up and performed and just turned the air blue, and it was just the most amazingly inventive, sardonic and satirical performance I'd ever seen. And it wasn't quite comedy, it wasn't quite rap, it wasn't.
And who was this?
And it was Thick Richards on.
Oh right, yes, yeah.
And so this would have been 13, 14 years ago, and I've since become really good friends with Thick Richards, and sort of following that, I got around the time, I think there was a bit of a convergence, as there has been more prominently since, of spoken word into popular culture and music. So Scribbius Pip and Kay Tempest, became a big fan of Kay Tempest, and then got into poetry for the page as much as for the stage. And
I think there's always been a tie-in with music and certainly what you'd call performance poetry, right back to Ginsberg being behind Bob Dylan in one of his videos, through obviously the Liverpool poets being part of the Mersey Sound, even calling the first book collective the Mersey Sound. And I think the rant poets of the 70s, and it does seem that there's very often a symbiotic relationship.
Definitely. I know it was the Ginsberg did the big gig at the Albert Hall in Royal Albert Hall in London, and I in my last job I worked at BIM, the British Institute of Modern Music, and I was very lucky to be able, well, I say very lucky, I talked them into allowing me to do a lecture on that symbiosis with.
Right. Oh, great.
But yeah, from the 60s and the 70s and as you say, the beat poets, and then punk poetry, ranters. I suppose John Cooper Clarke, Pam Ayres, Attila the Stockwell.
Oh yes, and of course he had a backing band, John Cooper Clarke. I toured with lots of the Sheffield bands back in the 80s, including Pulp. So I found that quite useful to, and was one of the reasons why I called myself Henry Normal, because I was in a suit, having come from work.
Yes.
And didn't want to get spat at. So.
Well, they're one of my favourite bands of all time, Pulp, and I suppose touring with them, it'd be very different to, well, quite different perhaps to supporting the Clash or the Sex Pistols.
I did support punk bands as well, and I remember supporting a band called Criminal Sex, which is not something I'd normally want to be associated with.
Yeah.
But they were a lovely bunch of lads. but you know, with girlfriends. But you know, I think he was all about having a shocking name in those days.
Yeah. There's
Now, I'm going to change the subject slightly because you and I met when we were at a neurodiversity event for another book that you're involved with called, well, NeurodiVERSE, but verse, VERSE.
yeah.
And so you helped edit that, is that right?
I did, yeah, and it was a real honour to be a part of it. So it was the brainchild of Janine Booth, who, aside from being, I think, one of the hands down the best performance poets in the country, is an amazing advocate for neurodiversity and for people with neurodivergent conditions, and the absolute, you know, the length and breadth of all of the submissions that came through it was absolutely endless, and it was fantastic, and the book was split into chapters. It's available to buy on Flapjack Press. Chapters on different aspects of life and how neurodiverse conditions.
And do you identify as neurodiverse?
Yeah, so I was in my first year of uni. I was diagnosed with dyspraxia and dyslexia, and I always make the jibe on stage that it was weird being diagnosed as neurodiverse as a music student, because it implied the existence of neurodichorus and neurodimiddle as well. But yeah, I got a lot of support for it while I was a student, and I work in universities now, and part of my job is facilitating that support for other students. So so it sort of feels a place, sort of feels well placed position to be in now, which I'm you know, very grateful to have got to.
Brilliant. Now, so I want to get a few poems in. So, can you have you got another poem for us?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm going to, if it's okay, share a piece about somebody who has supported me pretty relentlessly throughout my nearly 32 years, albeit in the most peculiar of ways. My marvellous mum. I came from a single parent family. She's not tuning in tonight, but she will be watching on YouTube. She's gone for dinner at her friend Kim's. But my mum, I could give an example. I had to move home when about 10 years ago, when I was in my early 20s, and because things were going really well, and I went out on a date while I was back home. We didn't really click on the date, and I arrived home, and my mum was there at the front door. How did it go? How did it go? And I said, oh, we didn't really click. And she said, oh, Rob, a good shag would cheer you up, wouldn't it? And I had a role as an extra in the Russell T Davies LGBTQ comedy drama, Cucumber. And I can remember the first episode aired, and she called and said, have you watched it? And I said, no. And she said, well, Rob, I just wish you told me it was all about willies before I got all of my friends from church to watch it. This piece is about my mum. It's called Man of the House.
Right.
Man of the House. Man of the house now. Houseman. Houseman. That's what they told her infant son. Before you've learned to walk, you must get on your feet and run. You're only 4 years clear of learning to wipe your own bum, but it appears you're the right gender, and every house must have one, like a drawer stuffed with plastic bags. A man of the house screws lids off jars with his Y chromosome. Every house needs a man, you see, manliness you should hone. Now pull your socks up, son, moss can't grow on a rolling stone, as if a 7-year-old's strength could be a pillar to her home. You might think, man of the house, well, this could make the best of me. Well, hold your horses, son, this house is in negative equity. Now get on manning up, young boy, you're hardly houseman pedigree. Your mum's sick in the head, you see, better hope it's not hereditary. She's not in great nick, they told him. Step up, they implored. She's had to spend some time inside a psychiatric ward. Her words illuminated by gaslight to the two she adored, despite her devotion persisting since they cut umbilical cords. She'd retired from teaching early, but never ceased to be a teacher. She reached all learning outcomes despite veering from procedure. Things tidy not, but defying odds, brought 2 kids through the ether. The thankless tasks those 2 kids brought, no grim task was beneath her. Changing the oil in a car, refelting a leaky roof, safely chopping down a tree, she taught him in his youth. She'd watch on with discernment as he got too big for his boots. And when necessary, she'd knock him down a peg or two, like when at 14, she drove round to pick him up off his paper round after he'd passed out and projectile vomited down a cul-de-sac following an evening of underage drinking. Or when at 24, he arrived home and boastfully showed a picture of his new girlfriend on his phone, and she said, "Gosh, Rob, has she got a guide dog?" Facebook market charity for shop finds, keep her heart a boon. Massive white elephants are filling all her rooms, but these white elephants are gifts to friends, not useless heirlooms. 30-odd years ago, she played guitar to him inside her womb. But him, his masculine quest sequestered not. He yearned to manly summit. He found a manly task to do, but she'd already done it. He read about how men won bread, but she'd already won it. The web that kept them safe, it was his mother who had spun it. Man of the house, eh? This supposed role superfluous. There was no needed plan. Against the toils that followed, it was her who had the upper hand. The ignorant around them, they just didn't understand, for with his mother holding fort, their house, it didn't need a man. Thank you.
Oh, great. Well done.
If I looked a bit off in the middle of that, my Zoom just said, "We've just logged you out of Zoom," and I thought, oh gosh.
You're being heckled by technology.
Heckled by technologies.
Bloody hell! That's funny, that isn't it? Yeah.
I'm glad it didn't.
I was on a Zoom the other day, and the computer decided to update.
Oh no.
And so there's nothing on my screen for a while, but people could see me, but I didn't know.
Oh gosh, right.
So yeah,
that's the worst one. I'd rather be able to see people but not do anything than be able to see me and me not know about it. It'd be like have the Big Brother cameras into the house.
Yeah. Well, when I moved into this house where I am, there was cameras. They'd had security cameras, and I had this awful fear that somebody would be able to tap into it and would watch my daily life, which I would bore them to death. And it would, all mystique about me would be gone.
Well, yeah, that's it. But this is, I suppose, what we've had to adjust to over the past few years, haven't we? It's
you do Twitter, don't you? Because
I do. I'm partial to a tweet. So
and what else do you do? Do you do Facebook and?
I do. I'm just adapting to because it moves so fast. I'm young. I'll be 32 the week after next. So but Instagram sort of taken over, and I was very slow with adjusting to that. But
so Instagram. See, I don't do Instagram because I'm too old. So tell me about what is it? Is it you put a picture up?
It's more pictures, I suppose. But
do you have any text with it?
Yeah, and then I think it responds more to hashtags than the other platforms do.
Okay. I do Instagram, but I put up a picture and then I'll put a poem. There's enough space to put a poem underneath it, and I do that on Facebook. I like Facebook the best because you get. I find you get more of a to and fro with people. People write comments, you can write back.
Yeah, that's it, and it's not limited to a character count or anything like that.
Not limited to a limerick.
Well, exactly, yeah. But love a limerick whilst I do. It allows for more elaborate poetry forms, doesn't it?
It does. It does now. So, hey, talking of limericks, you've got a big book of limericks, haven't you?
I have. Well, I've got a big filing cabinet, basically. So,
can you show us?
Yeah. Well,
you can move. Can you move your computer?
So what I'll do, I'll take it. It won't look very coherent.
Well,
Very
demystifying the arse. We should get an arsegram for this.
So this is the house of me and my wonderful girlfriend.
Yeah.
So
Don't show us anything that you've stolen.
So I've got a big file of limericks here that doesn't look very neat at all. But so the reason I've got
how many you got? How many limericks you got?
I would be surprised if it was less than 1,000, because it makes up for nearly 9 years worth of limericks I've had entered into a weekly competition in a pub quiz I run. So
are they all limericks that you've written?
No, none of them I've written. So
and is there any of mine in there?
No, they're just random.
Oh, I've got a good couple of hundred you can have.
Oh, brilliant, fantastic. Yeah. Well, the way we do it, we used to have a gin distillery sponsor us, and we decided, well, they gave us a bottle of gin every week, which was very, very generous of them. Yeah. And we said, well, we'll give the gin to whoever writes the best limerick, and so that was the incentive. But we kept it going for that long, and of course, people come up with topical things, and yeah, it's absolutely fantastic, because it's such an accessible form, you know, the 5 lines, rhyming structure, AA, BBA, and you're very partial to a limerick yourself, aren't you?
I think it's got a comic quality to it, because of the rhythm of it. I mean, comedy works on rhythms as much as poetry works on rhythm.
Yeah.
I wrote a limerick for. I'm doing a gig at the King's Place,
yes.
not the Palace. A theatre called King Place in London, and I'll recite it to you if I can remember.
Oh, please, yeah.
It's traditional, so it starts. There was an old man from King's Place.
Yes.
There was an old man from King's Place who liked to make love at a pace. His partner says, "Whoa, just take it slow. It's not a fucking race."
Fantastic. Brilliant. I've taken to writing limericks in every greetings card that I ever have to sign now. So if it's in my old job, my boss went off on maternity, and I wrote in her cards, when I first met my new boss Helen, I knew before long we'd be gelling. As she leaves on maternity, I can say with certainty her child will grow up to be a felon. And I don't work there anymore.
very, very nice. And lovely use of sort of slight half rhyme there. That's great. I like that. So what started you? So you're wandering around, and all of a sudden you think, I'll get involved in limericks. What was the first?
Well, with doing the limerick competition, or just.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So did that just come to you? I'm going to do a limerick competition.
Yeah, and I think by the time I started doing the quizzes, so nearly 9 years ago, I just sort of started getting into not really plucking up the courage to perform, but I'd become aware that people did perform poetry. Yeah. And in doing the quiz, at the time, I just started working at the Comedy Store, which is sadly now closed in.
Yeah.
So I was doing stage management, sound and lighting for them there, and I started to realise that poetry and comedy could be very, very much entwined.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's some great people like John Egley who do the comedy circuit, but his poetry is brilliant. But he's one of the funniest people you'd ever see. Yeah.
Tim Key and Kate Fox as well. I've seen do fantastic stand-up sets, and then folks coming through now. Broganty's at Carlin, who was absolutely wonderful. Came up through Punk in Drublic. First had him on to do an open mic.
Now you've mentioned Punk in Drublic, so let's explain what that is. You do a regular night in Manchester, don't you?
Yeah.
So tell us about that. It's called. Say this slowly so we get it.
Punk in Drublic poetry. So it's
That's a spoonerism.
on drunk in public.
Yeah.
And I suppose the night's very punky in that it's quite disorganized. But I started it in 2017. I'd run a bit more of a low-key poetry night prior to that at the Marble Arch, where I run one of the pub quizzes on Monday nights.
Yeah.
And I wanted something that not only sort of fitted the purpose more and you know, people were coming in and paying to watch, but that incorporated stand-up comedy as well. And I got a tax rebate of I think about 300 quid, and I used it to hire a venue and to pay 2 headline acts. And then I think on the first night, I think we had something like 15 acts doing it, which was far too many.
Yeah.
And I decided as well, I've lived in Manchester since 2009, and the homelessness crisis in Manchester, I think, compared to other cities, as to whether it's worse or not is difficult to say, but it's just so visible in Manchester. And I when I set it up, I was working 3 jobs, so didn't really have the time to sort of volunteer as well as doing performing and stuff. So I wanted for it to have a charitable element. And originally, I was just going to have the first one as a fundraiser. And the first one went really well. So it stuck, and we do all of them as fundraisers.
So you do one a month.
One a month, generally speaking. I have the odd month off, and then we do festivals as well. So
Great.
In this year.
How long have you been doing them now?
We had our 5th birthday this year, so 5.5 years, and we're very lucky. Lock 91, where we run on a regular basis now, have been incredibly supportive, and they're very, very helpful just in terms of the running and all of the tech stuff, because I do it really on my own. My wonderful girlfriend Jenny does help out, but I host, promote, book, and do the whole thing on my own, which is on the night.
I've got to say you're something of a one-off, a promoter to actually have a girlfriend.
I know, yeah, that's it. Yeah, well, it's one of those jobs that doesn't lend itself to a social life very much, or only to a very particular kind of social life.
I know, I understand that entirely. Now, so when's the next one?
Tomorrow, in fact. Yeah. So we are at Lock 91 on Deansgate Locks tomorrow, with a killer lineup, if I might say so myself.
Who's your headliner?
We've got Pete the Temp, who
Pete the Temp.
Pete the Temp, indeed.
I've not heard of Pete the Temp. That's a lovely name. He's not trying to sell himself too hard, is he?
He's not just the temp. Just you don't have to put up with him on a regular basis. He's
like occasional furniture.
Exactly. But he's. Brogan T. Zach Carlin does this fantastic bit about poets with monikers, with pseudonyms. And he said he was a poet like Attila the Stockbroker, or Pete the Temp, or Johnny the Slapdash Plumber, or something like that. But
that's a great one. My mate Pete Ramskill, he used to go out as John Bitumen. John Bitumen. Bitumen, as in what you put on the roads, which I always thought was quite a good. Oh,
that's fantastic. I've always considered coming up with it. I used to have a barber who said, "Have you come up with a stage name yet? You need a stage name if you're going on stage performing." Yeah. And, I haven't come up with one. I'm looking to.
I did originally think about calling myself Peter Doubt.
Peter, that's fantastic.
But I would have finished by now, wouldn't I?
Well, yeah.
So you've got some other gigs. Tell us about them. You've got some other gigs knocking about.
So we've got Punk in Drublic tomorrow, and then there'll be a NeurodiVERSE launch for that. So the book that we've mentioned, it was put together by Janine Booth and Kate Fox. We're doing
where's that?
At Lock 91 again on 27th of November. We've got another Punkin Drublic gig on my birthday at the Marble Brewery on the 15th of October with Jackie Hagan and Miles Hadfield, wonderful poets and comedians. Sean Davies, fantastic comedian who set up.
And you mentioned that you went to Derby, is that right?
Yes, yeah. I'm doing Wordwise in Derby. Be nice to be back down in the Midlands where people call each other Duck.
Yeah.
So Wordwise is Henry Normal and not your Henry Normal. What am I on about?
So am I there? Bloody hell! I hope I'm not watching telly here when I'm supposed to be there.
The promoter was supposed to be here an hour ago. What's he doing?
Yeah. Who's on in Derby? There's you.
There's me. It's the night's run by Sophie Sparham, fantastic poet, and Jamie Thrasavulu, again a brilliant poet. Dan Webber is hosting it, who is a brilliant poet from the Midlands who we've had to.
You know, the fact that there's all these names of people that I don't know, I find quite heartening. So you're obviously very involved in the Manchester scene, and would you say it's very healthy at the moment?
Well, it is. It's very, very healthy in many ways. So we've been running Punkin Drublic for 5 years, and then I had another one prior to that, and so I've been going to poetry gigs and involved in the poetry scene in Manchester for, I guess, like the best part of 10 years. When I started, I didn't know that there were poetry nights. Didn't know there was a poetry scene.
So beyond yours, there's other stuff going on, and
there are. And so what's been amazing since the pandemic is that the pandemic, I think, stopped a lot of nights. Bad Luck stopped the night run by Fat Roland and Joe, and then Speak, which was run by Alex Slater and Rosie Fleischman, that stopped. We carried on, but loads of new ones cropped up. So,
so to get a gauge of it for people who don't know, like me, because it's a long time since I lived in Manchester. How many different nights would you say there are over the course of a month?
Over the course of a month, I would say it's getting close to there being more than 20 a month. I mean,
more than 20. Because when I was there in the 80s,
yes,
there was one night.
Yes.
South Manchester Poets, it was called. It didn't even want to be associated with me in Crumpsall. I had to get a passport to get there. So it was the South. It was at Fallowfield Library.
Yes.
And there was about 30 people there, and they were all nice people, but it was very much a literary thing rather than a performance thing. And then there was a group built up called Common Word, which Lem was part of, like a little offshoot called Culture Word. So you had these, and they were sort of at a bookshop in the centre of Manchester. So you had these two things. So when I started the Manchester Poetry Festival, partly was because there wasn't that much going on, really. There were these two quite diverse ends of the spectrum, and so if you wanted to see Adrian Mitchell or somebody like Seamus Seamusini, then you couldn't see them because they never invited them.
Yes.
So it seemed very like a dormant giant back then. And I'm glad to say that it picked up as soon as we did the Poetry Festival, which was a huge success. It picked up, and it's been going 26 years now. But I'm glad to see that. Now, would you say, because I found in Nottingham, because I set up the Nottingham Poetry Festival 6 years ago, and that had quite a big youth element in Nottingham. There seemed to be lots of studenty type gigs and that. Would you say that there's a lot of youth element in Manchester?
Massively, and more so, and it's really encouraging. It's really lovely to see. I think poetry and performance poetry poetry for the page, for the stage rather than the page. I think it's sort of in some ways the ultimate proletariat art form.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to how it started, and so there is an element of it being sort of quite durable.
Absolutely, and you don't even need to be literate to do performance poetry. Yeah. It's big youth engagement. I think a few driving forces for that have been, aside from the sort of cultural.
Kay Tempest, possibly.
I mean, some of the
Kai Tempest, as she's now called.
Shirley May and Young Identity, but the stuff they've done in Manchester over the years in engaging young people is absolutely incredible. And some of the poets who've come up through there are absolutely wonderful. I know a lot of the poets I work closely with do a lot of workshopping, and so Dave Viney, who you interviewed the other week.
I'm thinking we've got too many poets now. I think we need to slim it down so as I can still work.
I know. Well, so something I'm finding when I go, because I still go to open mic nights as much as I can, and quite often just to watch. But I find myself more and more discerning of open mic poetry, and then there's a part of me that says, why are you thinking that? You can't think that. People have got to be.
No. I mean, I'm of course joking about having less poets, or at least half joking. Now, I'm going to say to people, if you want to ask Rob a question, you'll answer faithfully, won't you? And truthfully.
Yeah.
You're legally allowed.
Yes.
Somebody's put up you've got a couple of comments here, Rob. Eva over there in Brussels has said you're international today, Rob. We got Eva from Brussels, from Belgium. Says she liked your poem. Esther Gomez, I think she's Gomez Sierra. She's in Manchester. Beautiful poem. And then John Ling has actually sent you a limerick. Do you want to read that limerick out?
The reading of it, fantastic. And this looks absolutely wonderful. A Catholic knob called Rees-Mogg was caught with pants down in the bog. He said, I'm not lurking, just checking it's working for sirring the 7th Rees-Sprog. I thought it was fantastic.
Very nice. Very nice. You can stick that in. You can stick that in your collection.
Absolutely. We had a challenging night. A few Thursdays ago. The sad news of the passing of the Queen, but we had the Queen night afterwards, and the limericks that tend to come through in the competition tend to be quite on the nose, and it's difficult to sort of manage and balance the tone of that. So I said, let's have a laugh. We're allowed to have a laugh. But let's be respectful. There'll be different views. I'm sort of a passive Republican, but but the balance that was struck, I thought, was really good. A team did this that was quite on the nose. Still, they did. There once was a lady quite sinister who'd just become our prime minister. She said, "I'm not having this. Well, I've only one Liz," and coughed at the Queen and finished her.
I say, yeah, that's
close to the bone, but
you could have that in court as part of the evidence.
I know.
People were saying on Twitter, don't let Liz Truss near David Attenborough.
No, not at all. Yeah.
I did a gig a couple of days before the funeral. I did a gig in Liverpool, and they had a minute's silence and played the national anthem. And then said, now Henry Normal going to cheer you up.
Wow.
Now in Liverpool, they don't really sing the national anthem at the football stadium. So it was quite an interesting, as you say, balance to strike. So I talked about my own mum's funeral for a bit, and the fact that nobody sang "God Save Me" at that funeral. or in fact, as I'm not the oldest brother, my brother Dave was. They didn't sing "God Save Our Dave."
God save our Dave.
Which would have put my nose out of joint. Have you got another poem for us? Because I'd like to get a couple more in.
Absolutely, absolutely. The last one I did was about somebody who's all the way to
Now, your sound's going a bit. That's bad. It's back.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can now, yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm going to share another one about somebody who has been there for me endlessly. And this one goes as follows. A companion and the support that I felt the need to hide. Sit in silence, listen, and hide. Even when told to let him go, I kept him by my side. To deny him completely, it seemed cruel and I'm
going to stop you. I'm going to stop you because there's something weird with your sound.
I've got something going on there, haven't we?
Yeah. Now, can you start that again? And I tell you what, if you try not to move around a bit, let's see how that works.
Is there anyone on the Zoom who's muted?
No, it's your sound dropping out is the problem, Rob.
I think your book might be resting on the mic on the computer, maybe.
Thank you. That's a very good thought.
Very good point. Very good point. Here we go.
I can hear you now. That's better. I once did a gig, and so as I could read me poems, I put them up like that.
Yeah.
On the thing, and of course nobody could see me for the end of the gig.
The pitfalls of modern technology. Right, that'll stop.
Okay. I didn't want to go all the way through that poem and not hear it. So
no worries. Yeah, no, of course.
Again.
Brilliant. A companion and a support that I felt the need to hide. He'd sit in silence listening as I'd confess and confide. Even when told to let him go, I kept him by my side. To deny him completely, it seemed cruel and it seemed snide. Content to hang around and just procrastinate alone he spares judgments or assumptions, few know me better than he knows me. For years and years I've been soothed and assured by the love he shows me. I suppose it makes up for all the years of unpaid rent that he still owes me. I'm greeted every morning by his still and tranquil stare. Whilst I'm out earning a living, he's lounging without a care. If I bring a date back to my flat for sex, you know he's there. I am a man in my 30s who still has his childhood bare. This is BT. He's going back to bed after the gig, but he's glad to make an appearance. He'll sign autographs.
Is that BT or BT, as in British Telecom?
British Telecom, yeah. It's first name, second name Telecom. So but he was given to me on the day I was born.
Oh, lovely! Oh, that's gorgeous. Yeah. Now I know you're a bit of an evangelist for poetry, aren't you?
Yeah, I think it's so empowering, and I think you see that in the community and at spoken word nights around Manchester, how much it can break down the vulnerability around talking about difficult subjects. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. Now we've got a comment here from Esther. I've written down your definition of performance poetry as the ultimate proletariat art form. There you go.
Oh yeah, I think so, because it's so accessible. So I did my degree in music in Manchester, and music is my background, and I think there's levels of economic privilege in getting into the arts, and obstacles to people from less economically privileged backgrounds and working class backgrounds, and but with poetry there's nothing you need to get into it, and I always try and make the lineups that we put on at Punk in Drublic as diverse as possible.
Yes.
Not just in terms of not just in terms of ethnicity or sexuality or gender or so on, but you know, of different backgrounds, because I think we're all.
There's so many variations. I mean, the great thing is that we're all individuals, and I also always think that poetry is about your individual perception of the world. And sharing. So you could divide it up in all sorts of ways, couldn't you? There's a couple of areas where I don't think we're as conscious of diversity. One being age.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's one, and you know, there's obviously a regionalism as well. Which they got right on Coronation Street from the start by putting Baldwin in there as a horrible southerner.
Yes, and then the southerners were typecast
from forevermore, because we'd seen it on the telly.
Well, there's a piece in my book, the title piece of the book, that I go into character it, and the piece it's called How I Made My Millions, and it's about meritocracy and but I've started doing the character in a sort of Cockney accent.
All right, yeah.
But I don't know how comfortable I feel doing it all the time. So I've got lots of family in London and
no, I always find that a bit strange. You know, trying to take on somebody else's persona. Obviously, I used to write for Mrs. Merton and for Steve's characters, and that. So I have written in other people's voices, but I think with poetry, it's sort of more personal, isn't it?
Oh, definitely, yeah, and I think. I think to transform yourself into another character as a poet, like I think it takes a skill that transcends all of the literary skills, and it goes into the realms of, you know.
I did see a little poem the other day which made me laugh. Pam Ayres wrote a poem from the point of view of the asteroid. That's been it. I thought that was quite a nice idea. She didn't go as far as this, but when I was reading it, I got the idea of all the asteroids going, well, that was unprovoked.
Yeah, it was.
It's time to fight back.
Yeah.
Somebody's put a little comment here. This is Catherine Ratso. Hasn't Pumpkin Drublic won a Saboteur Award?
Yeah, we have actually. Thank you, Catherine, for drawing attention to my.
Have you got it? Have you got it there?
An accolade. It takes pride at the top of the mantelpiece.
What's that? What is that then? What's that? How do you get given that for what?
So, best regular spoken word night in the UK 2020. 2020, obviously the year when no spoken word nights went out.
Were you the only spoken word night?
Illegally, and they were doing it in Downing Street, so we thought, sod it, you know. But no, we were nominated in 2019 and then won it in 2020. Saboteur Awards are fantastic. So Sabotage reviews and Charlie Barnes, who runs it, it's really, really cool. When we went down, so we won this, it was an online award ceremony when we won it. When we went down the year before, when we were in the shortlist, it was just the most wonderful gathering of poets from around the country.
Now, I've got a question, because we're running short time, so I want you to do another poem, but I've got to ask you a couple of questions. Behind you is Eraserhead.
Indeed, yeah.
And that character is called Henry.
Indeed, yes, yeah.
Because people used to come up to me and say, "Hey, Henry, what do you know?"
What do you know?
which is a line from the movie. Are you particularly fond of that movie?
Yes, very much so, and a lot of David Lynch's work. I actually got this from a friend's dad, a great guy, Mark Potts, who gave this to me, and he was really, really lovely. And I can remember going around his house and we'd be like for drinks and stuff, and he moved out and he was like, "Oh, do you want that poster?" And I was like, "Oh,
no, it's a very. I've never had my hair like that, I'm glad to say. but it's a very haunting, film with some very haunting images in it.
Oh, it's been painted with googly eyes. I don't know if you can see the googly eyes on it.
Now, when we were talking earlier, there's a sense that you're on a crusade in Manchester to do something, and I wanted to get to the bottom of it. What are you hoping will happen in the next few years?
So there are performers on the Manchester poetry scene and who have come through the Manchester poetry scene who I want to see on TV, and I want to see doing amazingly well. There's too many to name all in one go, but I mean, Zach Collins done fantastically well. Some of the poets who've moved on from Manchester, Jonathan Kinsman is absolutely fantastic.
Well, what about poor old Lem? He never gets on television.
Oh, I know, yeah. You want to?
do you know he's the voice of Co-op?
I didn't realise he was the voice of Co-op.
The voice of Co-op, yes. It's what we do, he keeps telling me.
Wow. Well, it's fitting. Co-op Manchester.
Co-op, biggest building in Manchester. I once went out with a girl in New York, and she came back to Manchester, and it was a Sunday. Yes. And she came into the centre of Manchester, and I realised that the only big building we got in Manchester was the Co-op building. And she looked up at it, and I said, "It's usually bigger than this."
Yeah. Well, it's dwarfed now, isn't it? By the.
Oh, there's a few big buildings now, isn't there? Yeah.
But no, it's a proud part of Manchester's heritage.
It's lovely that you have a passion for poetry, and you have a passion for other poets and for a sense of community, and I love that about you. I hope it's all going to sort of continue, because obviously you're going great guns at the moment in Manchester and beyond, and the world.
Yeah.
And I hope you do make your millions.
Well,
I don't suppose you've made them yet.
I'm just 999,999 short at the moment.
Unless it's words, of course. I made my millions in words. I
actually had a load of money on government bonds, so I'm quitting. No, I'm joking. But.
No. It's been lovely doing these, and I'm glad we got to get you in, Rob. Will you finish us off with a poem? I want to thank everybody for watching tonight and for the other episodes. I hope you've enjoyed them, and I've enjoyed chatting to the various poets. And hopefully we'll do some more next year for Flapjack, and hopefully we'll see you somewhere, whether it be on what's chat Facebook. That's the one I do, or any of those social medias, or live in real person. If you do see me live, or you see Rob live, come and say hello, will you? That would be nice. Rob, what are you going to finish with?
I'm going to finish with a piece for my very, very good friend, Paul, who is absolutely wonderful and is my oldest friend. I'm doing it partly because he's been such an amazing friend to me over the years, and he had a very difficult time, lost his dad very recently, and partly because it's one of the shortest pieces in the book. It's a triolet, and I'm conscious we're right at the end. So this piece is called Stunners, and it's for him. With sardonic solidarity, your mocking soothes my stress. You tell me you don't care, but I am not that gullible. I am relieved of my need to get all my worries off my chest. With sardonic solidarity, your mocking soothes my stress. Sometimes I need to be reminded the best remedy is jest. My dates went well. You say she'll find out you're unlovable. With sardonic solidarity, your mocking soothes my stress. You tell me you don't care, but I am not that gullible. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you.